Apologetics, you know what I'm saying? Showing black dignity with the gospel.
What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman, rocking with BK Apologists and D New. You know what it is, man. Tru-ID Apologetics. How y'all feeling, man?
All right.
Feeling cold.
All right.
I'm
Yeah.
feeling cold.
Yeah, it's cold out here.
Definitely feeling cold for sure, for sure. I just, you can say I'm in a different location. We just moved to a new spot, like right before all the snow hit. You know what I mean? And so, between shoveling snow and trying to, wrestle with Walmart to make sure, kind of fight our way through Walmart to make sure groceries are where they need to be. It's been a crazy week, but we good though. We good though. We in here. We in here. That's what's up. That's what's up. Speaking of cold, from the nether regions of Canada, Wes Huff is out here still doing damage, man. He's out here doing big things. Was just recently on the Joe Rogan podcast. Was it the Joe Rogan Experience? I think is what it is.
Joe Rogan, JRE, yep.
JRE, man, he out here getting it in, is making waves. Like, I know you guys watched it as well. We're going to get into some specifics from that interview, but and you guys want to share kind of some initial thoughts, like, just the West Huff phenomenon, like your observations, what y'all think?
I know. I mean, I feel like, for such a time as this, right? It's learning a little bit about his backstory, his origin story was very interesting. I feel like all his experiences has prepared him for this particular event, and it's a great time to be an apologist. It's great to see when doors get open, and we just pray that Wes, utilizes his newfound fame to glorify God, and he just continue to walk in spaces we don't usually get to walk into, so I'm very grateful for what we are seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. Like when I think back to, even before the video got released, when Wes did his video about how he debated Billy Carson and everyone was waiting for it. And as the weeks went on, people were starting to get more intense in their, anxiety to see it. And even in, Mark Menard and how he wasn't releasing it and all of this stuff, that led up to this point. I remember being like frustrated myself, thinking, when is this going to be released? When is it going to be released? But all of that has led us to this. All of that has led to people's being anxious to see what the fuss is about. Why wasn't it not being released? All of it has led to this point, and it's just amazing, how God is always working behind the scenes, and we have no clue what he's up to, but every moment is orchestrated. And it's just amazing to see where we are at now with Wes being on like the largest podcast in the world, as a humble Canadian apologist. It's just amazing to me. It's definitely, I don't think that anyone would disagree with this unless you're an unbeliever, but definitely God orchestrated. How could this not be?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And interesting, like, afraid to use the phrase for such time as this. I think about the book of Esther, where in the book of Esther, you actually don't see God's name like mentioned directly. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you can see like the sovereign hand of God working kind of behind the scenes in the events, all throughout the book of Esther, tying that into what you were saying, D. I think that's kind of exactly what you see in this, this small glimpse of, I think we can see God's sovereignty in the West Huff situation, where the delays and even Billy Carson's blow ups and shouts and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's all these different moving parts that have worked together. It created like a groundswell by which now he had this opportunity to go on the Joe Rogan Experience and then just amplify the gospel even more. So it's like you do get a chance to see God's hand every now and again, I think, in life. And this is just one of those where it's really cool to sit back and watch, man. Really cool.
Yeah.
Canada's out here balling. Canada's out here balling. I mean, I guess it's like I said in our previous episode. I know y'all took a L up there in Canada, with Drake or whatever. You know what I mean? But I think y'all getting back right. I mean, you're on Joe Rogan now, right? So all things work together for the good. Apparently, for Canadian,
God is everywhere.
He's everywhere. He's everywhere. So I know we want to get to a couple of clips, but I just want to say, man, shout out to Wes, man. Like honestly, I think from an apologetic standpoint, to be able to cover as much ground as he did in that interview, like is extremely hard to do. To just kind of be all over the place. I don't know if Joe Rogan is ADD or not, but he's it's just like this shotgun blast of different topics. That Joe Rogan. It looks like he's got a billion and one rabbit holes, and I feel like Wes was able to kind of keep up with that and just at every turn have something of value to say from an apologetic standpoint. So that's extremely hard to do. I don't know if we've seen um, an apologetics display of that on that big of a stage like ever. I mean that's
Right.
pretty
Right.
that's pretty huge.
Agreed.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we'll get to a couple clips, man, and see where we go. Right.
Right.
All right.
But it's funny while you're getting that set up. I've seen Christians critique him though on video saying, "Well, he didn't really give him the gospel, and he didn't do this, he do that." I'm like, he had, it's 3 hours with the top podcaster on the planet, and he did cover a lot, including the gospel. Was it as robust a presentation as it could be? No. But I mean, what you want him to, it's like he had a short span of time, and he gave him everything that Mr. Rogan wanted, and I felt like he helped move the needle when it comes to Rogan's perception of Christianity.
Right.
More so than anyone else. So
yeah, I mean,
to nitpick is like weird to me.
There's a lot of friendly fire going on with that, which I think some people just hating, or some people just have a very narrow understanding of what the gospel is, you know what I'm saying? And just the different ways that you can, present something that's of gospel value. I think some people just kind of really don't understand it. But to me, I look at it like if you have a race car, right? A race car is made with certain materials, it's very lightweight, you know what I mean? It's just made a certain way. And it's great for being on the racetrack. It's built for that. But it's not going to work too well as a dump truck. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to try to tow trash with that race car, as awesome as that race car is, it's not going to do well. You need something that's built differently for that task. You need a dump truck. A dump truck is going to be heavier. It's going to have certain specifications. It's going to have the whole thing in the back. Like it's built to do its job, right? So I think that likewise, when it comes to apologetics, we have to understand that certain approaches aren't built for certain audiences and contexts. I'm saying you might be in a context 1 minute where you need the race car approach, right? Something that's maybe lighter, quick, can be delivered at not a surface level, but just a little bit quicker. And then other times you're going to dig deep. You're going to, you may have more time where you can dig deep and go into all the nooks and crannies of the gospel, so on and so forth. It's just, you got to be sensitive to your audience and you got to read the room. I think
it was as if Joe Rogan didn't do a public confession of faith, somehow Wes failed at the, what I mean? It's such a weird, bar to give to him. But anyway.
I think it's very easy for onlookers who didn't for onlookers who weren't in the seat of Wes Huff. It's very easy to critique him and to criticize what he did say and what he didn't say. But you're not in that moment. You're not the one who's engaging in a 3-hour conversation, and you're not the ones who's working in your mind. Okay, how am I going to say this? How am I going to do this? Like, it's very easy to be an armchair critiquer when you're not the one.
Right.
No, it's a fact. And I mean, BK, we had a recent experience, nowhere near on the level of Joe Rogan and that whole thing. I'm trying to put us in the same category. But I mean, in the debate that we were in, it's very different when you're like sitting back, maybe doing a video review or something like that, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's valuable versus having a live interaction with somebody. Or all three of us have had in-person interactions with Hebrew Israelites, Comedics, so on and so forth. Like, it's very different in the moment than, maybe if you're online on Facebook or something like that, having an exchange. Nothing wrong with the Facebook exchange, but we just have to understand that it's different. And so we got
Yeah.
to be very careful, man, especially when somebody's doing their best to represent Christ, and you can tell that person is within all with all integrity trying to represent the gospel well. I think we just need to be very, cautious about being critical of that kind of person,
Mhm.
man.
Yeah.
That's my view. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, Wes Huff did his thing, man. He did his thing.
Pleasure. Sure. So I, like many people, was introduced to you because of the debate you had with Billy Carson. Quote unquote. You know, it's one of those things where it's very unfortunate when people get caught with their pants down. And I'm not an expert in many things, but the things that I am an expert on, you could wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and ask me about those things. And I go, oh yeah, no, this is what it is. Yeah. I know, like martial arts or comedy, I could give you an expert version of reality. It seems like he does not have that, and he is a wonderful talker, and it's a lot of fun. I like watching his videos. I love all that ancient history stuff, and even the most ridiculous tinfoil hat aspects of ancient. It's fun. It's entertainment. But I know that there's a difference. Like Andrew Schultz and I had a discussion about this. Like he said when he had Billy on the podcast, he said, we're not going to research anything. We're not going to search anything. We're not going to do anything. Just let him talk because it's fun. Yeah. Andrew's awesome. But when he was on with you, it was quite apparent that you are an actual expert in the Bible and in many religious texts, and that he didn't necessarily have the facts straight. So what was the fallout of all of that?
Well, it's interesting you say the expert thing, because I literally was asked to do it 24 hours beforehand. So I had like the least amount of preparation going into it. And I was okay with that because I listened to Billy Carson. Well, and I listened to the stuff he'd said. So I knew enough about the ways that he'd articulated things about the ancient Near East and the Bible and Christianity to know enough.
I think y'all want to comment on that? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like off the rip, Joe Rogan obliterated Billy Carson with a very rational, sensible observation. Right? It was so precise. It's simple but deadly at the same time. He's like, look, if you know your stuff, it really doesn't matter when and where, right? He gave the 4 o'clock in the morning analogy. You wake up, you wipe the cold out your eyes, and you spit the facts because this is what you do, and that when Wes and Billy Carson had this discussion, it was very clear who knew what they were talking about. And for a very long time, Billy was able to get over and give an appearance of being an expert. But then when the real deal stands next to him, now you see the vast difference. And I feel like within those few minutes, Mr. Rogan just completely dismantled who Billy Carson is. Like, yeah, he's fun. He's entertaining, but it's not true. So to have someone who has the largest bullhorn on the internet say that about you, that's career ending. That's career ending.
Yeah, I liked this clip for that same reason too, BK, because I feel like Mr. Rogan showed an objectivity that so many of Billy's followers have not shown. People are still his followers, his fans are still in comment sections saying that Wes doesn't know what he's talking about, or, challenging Wes to debates, listening to even some comments from Hebrew Israelites. You don't have to be a Christian to be objective about this. It is clear that Billy fell very short from the scholarship of Wes Huff. You don't have to be a Christian to admit this. Right. Was the resurrection, or is the resurrection mentioned in not the Sinai Bible, the Codex Sinaiticus? Yes or no? This is an objective thing. Is the gospel of Barnabas a legit piece of documentation or is it forgery? You don't have to be a Christian just to admit the truth. No, it's not legit. And so I appreciated the objectivity that Joe was able to have and just to be able to call a spade a spade.
No, I totally agree. And to both of y'all's points, I wonder what kind of impact this is going to have now, for Billy Carson. I mean, because you've been in his world. I mean, this is about as big of exposure as you can get. You know what I mean? To really like to everybody to recognize, like, all right, yeah, you're really not a truth teller. You're really not somebody who is a reliable source of information. And to have that acknowledged on the largest stage, if you will, that's a dagger right there. Like from a career standpoint, I don't know how you recuperate from that. He's going to have to like go back to school, get an actual doctorate, and then come back some later point 10 years from now. I mean, but right, he's got to entirely reinvent himself, I think.
I've perused the comment sections of some of his like the videos that he's still doing, like recent ones. And there's still people in there saying, I don't care what they say, Billy, they're just trying to take you down. I rock with you. And it's just disappointing because that means you're not really interested in Mr. Carson for his ability to be truthful. You're in it for something else. Like it satisfies something else for you. It doesn't satisfy the criteria for being a truth teller. He very clearly is, at the very least, not as well researched as he's been telling you all for years. And so how can you be confident in his research skills after this? Like, this tells me that you're not really there for his research skills. You're there for something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fact. And I mean, the other side of it is too, I think that, goodness gracious, for this dude here, man, I think Billy Carson takes advantage of the fact that today, in today's world, there is a blurring of the lines between education and entertainment. I think because it's all like we're all in this marketplace called the internet, there's this blurring of the lines between the two. And I think that what happens is he kind of takes advantage of that. You know what I'm saying? Like people can't tell the difference. So like if you're watching something like I like sports. And so if I'm watching First Things First, shout out to my guy Chris Broussard, you got Nick right on there. They're arguing about, the Washington Commanders who's balling right now. I mean, shout out to my squad. I mean, like that's not really I mean, there are elements of like truth matters in those contexts, but it's entertainment. There's a lot of opinion, right? It's not the same as when I sit down and listen to somebody talk about worldviews, history, philosophy, and education. You know what I mean? Like that's a different genre that I'm consuming there. And I think what's happening is people can't tell the difference between the two. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's, people like Billy Carson, like I said, can kind of take advantage of that because people don't know how to discern between, the real and the fake or opinion versus actual objectivity. So anyway, it's just a whole host of problems, that I think Billy's got to deal with. But this is not about Billy, though. We talking about Wes Huff today. We're going to keep moving our way through the clips. As again, Huff just does a masterful job representing the gospel here. So let me get to that. Give me a second. Let me get to the next clip. Is there anything else you guys want to share as I'm moving to the next clip?
I mean, I already knew he was a nerd, but man, the nerd level that this man, like what he studies, and you got to look at the margins and the cursive of the margins of the manuscript, and depending on the spacing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I couldn't do that. Wow.
Yeah.
He reminded me of you, BK.
I don't know how much of the kind of testimony stuff you watched of mine, but just before my 12th birthday, I actually was diagnosed with a neurological condition that left me paralyzed from the waist down.
Yeah, I did see all that.
Yeah. So that's a condition that's called acute transverse myelitis, which I often say is a word you can forget as soon as you hear it because it's a complicated one. But what happened was that I had the flu and my body's immune system attacked the nerve endings at the base of my spinal cord. and cause swelling and cut off the communication between my brain and my legs. And
instantaneously, right?
Yeah, basically, I'd gone down for a nap. I was camping out on the bathroom floor for flu reasons. And when I woke up, about 30 minutes later, I couldn't feel my legs. And so, yeah, that's the acute part of the acute transverse myelitis, was that it was basically instantaneous. And that's what made the diagnosis as severe as it was. Like they said, there's a 30% chance. It was like a small percentage of probability that I would recover, but a much higher percentage that there would be a lot of either complete paralysis for the rest of my life, or some kind of issues with walking. It's related to like diseases like multiple sclerosis, in that it's neurological and it affects that kind of thing. And 1 month from the day that I woke up and couldn't feel my legs, I woke up on Saturday morning, got out of bed, walked over to my wheelchair and sat down.
1 month.
1 month, yeah. January 8th to February 8th, exactly.
Very fortunate.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What treatment did they give you?
So initially they gave me steroids to reduce the swelling, but so I spent 11 days in the hospital, being overseen by pediatric neurologists and specialists in this, because it's a very rare condition. And so they were studying me, and they gave me steroids, and they did some other tests, but really there was no true kind of treatment in that. And so I was doing physiotherapy. I'd be pulled out of gym class in school, but it was a little bit of a joke. Like, can you move your legs? You know, can you, it was.
Could you move anything?
No, nothing.
Could you feel anything?
No. In fact, when I was in the hospital, I'd wake up and there'd be pinpricks in my legs, because they'd be testing where the reactions were, and they'd have used a syringe. So I'd wake up and there'd be these tiny little pinpricks in my legs, because they'd been testing while I was asleep to see what the kind of, whether it was registering neurologically with anything. But I couldn't feel anything. I was fully a paraplegic.
Whoa.
Yeah, but going back to that, like, so I experienced this, what I consider to be a true supernatural experience, in that I walked into the hospital to the doctors that had overseen me, and they were the first ones that used the word miracle. They said, we really don't have any type of medical explanation. And mainly because there was no atrophy. Because of the cutoff of the communication, my muscles in those 30 days were fine. And it's a short amount of time, but they said there should be something, and we're picking up nothing.
That's crazy. Because I've broken limbs before and had them in casts, and just in the 6 weeks that you have a cast on,
Yeah.
you have massive atrophy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the kind of predication for them using the word miracle. And so that's kind of, it marks this, what I do consider to be like this supernatural, something happened. But
did you feel like that was like a calling that like led you?
I think that was the clip right there you wanted to look at, right?
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah, I so appreciate Wes including this part of his life story into the sit down with Joe, because again, you mentioned it before, Adam, about the audience that you're in front of matters. And I think it was so beautiful that he was able to give this real life example of the miraculous or the supernatural happening in his life, to supplement that, not to supplement, that goes along with the academic side of it, right? Because sometimes, in academia, you can be all heady, but I think it was just beautiful that Wes was able to show that it's not all headiness here. There's also a direct interaction, that the God that I serve, he interacts directly into our lives, and he changes things, and he does things. And as well, too, I think as well to that audience, it was important to show, I mean, this comes up later in the interview when they talk about the supernatural, but it's funny to me, sometimes people can be so opposed to miracles, but miracles happen. People chide and, make fun of Christians for believing in the miraculous. Miracles happen today. You just have to be in conversation with doctors, with anyone in the medical field, if they're honest with you, anywhere from first responders to specialists, surgeons, they will tell you that miracles are not these, things that don't happen. Literally, things that oppose the natural order, that oppose our human anatomy, that oppose our human physiology. These things happen often. Miracles are not as outlandish as people, believe them to be. So I'm glad that he got to showcase that.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think one of the things that, like you said, that I appreciate about Huff, being just, really being intentional about sharing this story is that while I mean, certainly, God has revealed himself, in scripture, he's revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ. I mean, we have, special revelation that's universal, right? But even within the biblical text, you can see God working in people's lives in ways that are specific to them. Like there are things that God does, whether it be opening up, a woman's womb, or whether it be, there's just all a number of things where God is involved in people's lives, involved in creation. And I think for whatever reason, we sometimes lose sight of that, that we do serve a God who, for his own purposes, in his own timing, every now and again, reaches into, somebody's life and does something that they know was him. You know what I'm saying? And it may not be an experience that upon communicating it to somebody else would be able to also recognize that it was him. But to that person, they say, hey, this is a miracle. This is something that God did. I've had that experience myself. Like I've seen God work in my life in ways that, like, I know that God did X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm saying? And so I think we have to allow for that, for that individual, that personal relationship with God, where he's making himself known, in a very direct way. So that's
I think and it also helped mold his character and his heart, because elsewhere in the video he talks about how he gets into sports, and one of the main reasons why he did that because he was just so grateful to be able to move,
right,
and he never wanted to take that for granted. And I feel like that was so important for him to learn that lesson so early, so that later on, when the accolades and the awards and the praise comes, it could still keep him grounded, because he still remembers when he couldn't even walk.
Right.
And I feel like maybe God allowed that to happen because he knew that you're going to need to be anchored in humility, because in the future, you're going to have this success, And I think it's very interesting that, and he makes it a point to say that the doctors were the first ones to say it was a miracle.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't clergy.
Yeah.
It wasn't the bishop of his church. It was people who are all about data and observable science.
Yeah.
Right? These are the people that say, yeah, this is a miracle.
Yeah.
So you can't, so you're gonna fight the doctors, So, and I feel like it's a great wedding of his academia, but his being in touch with the supernatural side of what we believe.
Yeah.
And I feel like we need to do a better balancing act of those two things as believers. A lot of times we like to just completely, unspiritualize the Bible when, we're talking about God and demons, and there's all sorts of things that's happening that's just crazy, right? Yeah. And we like to kind of downplay it. I'm like, no, it's in the book. The fact that you believe in a God that transcends space, time, and matter, you're already crazy. You're already spooked out. Right? So you might as well just go hold away, right? So, but I feel like he gave a balance. He's like, he has a testimony about the supernatural, but he's a man that's also about data and facts.
Yeah.
Right.
And he showed that you can have both. That you can have both.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, BK, it's just I wonder sometimes. I know, or I'll just say for myself, there are times I have felt uncomfortable with sharing something that God did in my life that was, certainly supernatural. I'm talking about like with other believers. Like it shouldn't be that way, right? If anybody should be open and comfortable with sharing God's supernatural work, it should be believers interacting with believers. You would think, like I don't know, why we're like that. I don't know why we get skittish, around talking about. I mean, we're talking about God, like who Himself is supernatural. So, like, why in the world, like you said, would we, feel some type of way? You know what I mean? We really have to
Well,
get out.
it's the response. Most people will look at you as if you're Looney Tunes.
Right.
And we want people to look at us as, no, we're just normal. Well, you're not really normal because you believe in God. I mean, it's just that ship has sailed a long time ago. The minute you said Jesus is Lord, you know what I mean? You're not going to be like everyone else, And we just have to feel more. We have to normalize the fact that people will not see us as normal.
That's a great way.
And that's why. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No.
Well, I was just say that's why I'm so glad that Wes communicated it in the way that he did, from the perspective of being in a hospital, being a person who is subjected to all of these specialists. People can identify with that. Everyone believes in miracles when their loved one is in the hospital and they need a miracle. Everyone believes in miracles when you're asking something that the doctors are saying is impossible that won't happen, and you want the opposite. Everyone believes in miracles, right? Yeah. I know that, in my own personal life, working in the medical field, you can't convince me that miracles do not happen. I've seen literal miracles in front of my face. I've spoken to a woman who her heart was literally not beating. Literally not beating. And I'm talking to her and asking her how she's feeling. Well, everyone else is scurrying, antic and frantic, trying to hook her back up to machines that had plugged out. Heart not beating, flatline. And I'm having a lovely conversation with her. You can't tell me that miracles don't happen. I mean, I'm not the one.
I heard that. Testimony service on Tru-ID. We're gonna have good old fashioned. All right, cool. So I'm gonna slide over to the next clip.
Listen, I like Billy. He was a nice guy. I really enjoy talking to him. I really do. I think his videos are fun. But I also think truth is important.
I have no problem with him as an individual.
I know that was a quick shot, but you wanted to comment just on that piece right there, BK?
No, we keep going.
Oh, keep going.
Oh, okay. that was my whole clip?
Yeah, you said, it was like 7 seconds, but keep going. Or you just tell me when to stop.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, course correct and recognize what you know and what you don't know. And that you're not doing people a service, especially people like myself that aren't educated in this. Like we turn to others who claim to have a vast knowledge of this to help me out. Tell me what's going on. When I sit down and talk to you, tell me what's going on. And if you don't really know, you're f***ing over a lot of people, unfortunately, for yourself.
Yeah.
All right, you can stop there.
How do you say it again? Linear?
You just want to go long enough to get an extra curse word in there that I'm gonna have to edit out?
Yeah, I want to mess up and get you striking your vision.
Yeah, appreciate
it. No. But and again, he's saying what he said. It's similar to what he said in the beginning of the podcast, but what he's saying here, though, is though it can be fun and entertaining, he kind of alludes to the fact that what Billy does is dangerous, right? Because if you don't know that what he's saying is fallacious and you believe it to be true, and you're somebody who's seeking for truth, and you assume that what he is saying is accurate, it actually hurts you. Because eventually you'll find out that it's not true, and then you're going to feel betrayed. And, it's like, instead of church hurt, it's ancient alien hurt, I guess, right? It's paleo contact hurt, right? So, but then people just like disregard any kind of interaction with spirituality, right? Because of people like Billy Carson, so the reason why we do what we do and why Wes does what he does is we detect the impending danger of people like Billy Carson in people's lives. He's actually dangerous when you're not aware of what he's really talking about. You know, and we're here to kind of show people that, hey, it's not what you think, it's really this. And I think it's important that we do what we do so that people could avoid danger. It's a dangerous thing to be seeking for truth in the wrong places.
Yeah, it's just really an echo of, the audiences that we deal with, the Hebrew Israelite community and the conscious community. There's so much thoughts and ideas within those communities that are just not true. And, of course we get we get insulted, we get denigrated, we get castigated for, our desire to correct their untruths and to say, no, y'all, what you're saying, what you believe, it doesn't actually match up with truth. But yeah, this is what we do as apologists. And I mean, it doesn't make us better than anyone. But wanting to help people find truth is something that everyone should want to do. The problem is we have people out here thinking that there's all of these different truths, but there's only one ultimate truth. I always say this: there's only one ultimate truth, and ultimately, truth is a person. So,
all right, now there's some philosophy in there. That's what I'm talking about. No, I mean, I think to some extent, and I haven't really done a whole lot of thinking about it, but I feel like we've been desensitized to deception. Like we don't realize like how dangerous deception is. Lies are dangerous. They're so dangerous that it was Satan's his first go-to in the Garden of Eden, in the beginning. I'm saying his first angle to get mankind off track was what? To use deception, to be deceitful. Then all throughout, through all throughout the scriptures, what do you see him doing? Sowing deception. That's what he does, right? And so I think that we have to really maybe take stock of how valuable truth is and how dangerous deception is. Like it's really not a game. So, to what Joe Rogan is saying, I mean, I'm not sure how much he's thought about it, but there's a lot of truth there in that with Billy, I mean, with Billy Huff, what Billy Carson is doing, is really dangerous. Like you could really mess up people's lives. And actually, let me just say this too. Shout out to Free Smoke Valentin. I got my free smoke mode on right now. I'm not just saying that to unbelievers. I'm saying that to Christians as well, to specifically preachers. I'm saying, like, I'm not a preacher basher. I'm really not. But there's a reason why the scriptures talk about teachers being held to a higher standard, because you can do a lot of damage to somebody if you're mishandling God's word, right? If you're out here teaching that faith is some sort of like magic wand that's going to get people wealth and riches and everything that they want, and if you're having problems in your life, then it's because you're not strong enough in your faith and you haven't really tapped into a million and one things that you're supposed to be doing to make your best life now. If that's what you're teaching people, you're literally handicapping fellow believers, because then they cannot engage with God in truth. They cannot interact with God in the way that he really is, because they think God is a genie. You know what I'm saying? Like that handicaps people. That destroys lives. And we cannot be playing out here with that. We can't be playing. Deception is dangerous, no matter who it's coming from. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a friend like a few weeks ago, and I said something exactly along those same lines. I mean, I don't want this to go in a different direction, but just piggybacking off of what you said, I think that sometimes in the church, we can become satisfied with less than truth. We're not really up in arms about non-truth, because the non-truth that we're hearing sounds good. And so I think this is one of the problems that as congregants who receive from our leaders, that we need to really safeguard against the satisfaction of non-truth and just being okay with it.
Wow.
I'll just leave that there.
So that's really good. That's really good. Like, we can't be complacent as we pursue, God's truth. I mean, you got people who are to this day, unsure of the love that God has for them because they came up in a church environment that was very, legalistic and so focused on do's and don'ts, to the neglect of teaching about God's grace and mercy, not holding those things in balance, that they don't really understand, the love of God. And I'm talking about believers. I'm saying, like, this is it's a real thing, man. It's a real thing. So I think we got one more clip to go. All right.
Both, I have this love-hate relationship with all of Peterson's stuff because he seems to get so much right where he walks up to the line, but he doesn't want to cross over.
And is the crossover, you think, connected to a life in academia? Or
no.
What do you think it is?
I wonder, and I'd love to talk to him about this, like, how do you remedy this issue that, because he seems to think that the concept of Jesus as an example is more important than the actual flesh and blood first century itinerant Jewish preacher who was crucified and rose from the dead physically, which is the claim of the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament. That's an example for us to look on and live by. But I actually think that Jesus condemns moralism. And ultimately what I see Peterson doing is looking at Jesus as a moral example. And if Jesus is nothing but a moral example, then you can save yourself and you don't actually need a savior. And so I think actually Jesus would have critiqued that because Jesus was very against moralism.
And how do you define Jesus being against moralism? Like, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, Jesus looks at the religiosity of his day with like particular groups like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who are these other groups of Jews during his day. So we talked about the Essenes, who actually aren't mentioned in the Bible, but there are other groups like the Pharisees, who are like lay scholars, and the Sadducees, who are professional priest scholars. And he's constantly critiquing the fact that they have this hypocritical religiosity to them, where they're doing things like tithing their mint leaves, like to make sure that they get all of. This is where we get the idea of the letter of the law versus the intention of the law. Like, Jesus critiques them for that because he says, you're trying to do everything right and you're missing the point. So one of the things he says is like, if your donkey falls in a ravine on the Sabbath, do you pull it out? Or does that work? Like, what's the point of the Sabbath? Is it to not do any work? Like, is it to make sure that you're not working too hard because you might be breaking the Sabbath? Or like, what is the point? He says, like, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And that there's this intention. This is the whole Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, is he keeps saying, you have heard it said, but I say, and he refers to the Mosaic law. And it looks like he's critiquing the Mosaic law, but he's not actually. He's getting back to the intention of the law. So when he says, you have heard it said, do not commit murder, but I say to you, anybody who harbors a hate for their brother in their heart has already committed murder. And what he's getting to is like, what's the intention? What's the meaning of the law that God gives to you? Because the law is like a mirror. It shows you how dirty you are. But his critique is he's like, you guys are trying to clean yourself with a mirror. That's stupid. It's just if anything, it's gonna make you more messy. Like, get in the shower. The law is not what cleans you. The law is what reveals that you're dirty. And so in that sense, I think, if Jesus is a moral example, it actually misses what I think Jesus actually said about what his purpose was, in that you can't do enough to actually live up to the standard that God holds you to. And so if you keep striving, you're actually going to wear yourself out and be exhausted.
Like atheists.
Man. Bars on top of
cooking.
bars.
Yeah, he was cooking.
Bars.
He was
So
cooking.
good.
Yeah, he was good. Wes Huff was cooking on that joint, bro. That's wild.
Man,
Wow.
Wes Huff
Let's go.
just summarized the book of Galatians in like 2 minutes. How long was that clip? It was like 7 minutes. That is the book of Galatians, right?
Yeah.
The law versus faith, right? The doing versus trusting, confidence, belief in, right?
Right.
And I just really, it's funny. This clip also was interesting too. You know, it's just so relevant to so many groups. Like if someone who is Muslim is listening to that, or a Hebrew Israelite, you know, this idea that Paul taught something different than Jesus. No, he did not. Paul elucidated what Jesus said in the Gospels. Right. They're not contrary to one another. And so, man, it was just a beautiful apologetic to any type of Judaizer. It was beautiful. Wes Huff is on Joe Rogan refuting Judaizers. What is happening?
Yeah, I didn't have that on my bingo card, you know, for the year. Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, he killed it, man. And like you said, I think just the universality of just the true gospel. You can just see how he just hits so many different groups that I think there's just that fall into that legalism. But I mean, and this goes back to something you said earlier, D-New, just the way that he put it in such simple terms that anybody could catch. You know what I mean? Like you could clearly see that Joe Rogan wasn't familiar with the ins and outs of, you know, Judaic law keeping versus this. But you know, at the end of the day, when the point was made, it made sense. He understood. Yeah. And I think that's just so utterly important that we communicate in ways that people understand, that we shed light on the gospel. You know, that's really what it comes down to. I thought that was phenomenal. That was phenomenal.
And, you know, even though what he said was definitely like he was heavy in his apologetic bag, but in that discourse, you're hearing a gospel presentation, right? Because a major component of the gospel is you can't save yourself.
Yes.
No matter what you do, you can't do it. I don't care if you tie your mint leaves and you wear your zits and you pray and 3 times or 5 times a day and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can't make it. You can't earn your way to salvation. You're in trouble.
Period.
And you need help. You need to be saved. That's what he's saying.
That's what he said.
That's a major part of the gospel.
Yeah.
Now, did he turn it around on Joe Rogan and said, "So, Mr. Rogan, do you believe?" Like, okay, he didn't do that. Okay, fine.
Right.
Fine. But to say that he wasn't presenting the gospel, I just find it odd because there it is right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he even contrasted it with, they were talking about what's his name? Gosh, now his name is escaping me, but Jordan Peterson. Just talking about how it's what I heard Wes Huff say is that it's not like this theoretical kind of archetype Jesus that's really that we ought to be intrigued with. There's a real person. There's a real Jesus of Nazareth who had something to say. And that person is not concerned with what you can do. He's actually highlighting what you can't do. And then, in presenting the resurrection, he's like, okay, well, not only can you not do it, but by the way, this is what Jesus did on your behalf. I'm saying, like, he was crucified and rose from the grave. Like, so all of these elements of the gospel are highlighted in this conversation. So for anybody who says, oh, he didn't present the gospel, like, he covered the elements of the gospel, our desperate need for a savior, Jesus dying on the cross, I'm saying, for our sins, the resurrection, right? I mean, he's covering these pillars of the gospel, and I feel like it's again, I just think he did a phenomenal job, and that's really hard to do. First of all, when you're not in the driver's seat of a conversation, because obviously it's Joe Rogan's show, so Rogan can ask follow-up questions and go here, there, and everywhere. So it's really hard when you're not in the driver's seat of a conversation to still be able to steer it back to the gospel. And you can tell Wes was being intentional about it, because even though they're having this conversation about miracles, I can't remember what it was that Joe Rogan said, but Wes took that opportunity to bring the conversation around to the resurrection, and so you can see that he's thinking in the moment, like, how can I steer this conversation towards something that's gospel oriented. And I just think that he did extremely well. Extremely well.
Yeah, he asked a question. He said, "What do you think about Jesus?" And that totally shifted the conversation to Jesus.
Right.
So I think that was tactical, it was strategic, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, he did his thing, man. He did his thing. Wes Huff, we need you on Tru-ID. You know, we need to get that interview. You know what I mean? But in the meantime, as we get ready to get out of here, let me just say, any final thoughts from you guys on this should I call him Hollywood Huff? I don't know. Like he's a big name
Well,
now.
He's
I
not
mean,
gassed. He's not gassed.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't,
what
is
I'm
there
call him.
still a
You can't call him.
Hollywood? I mean, I'm not quite sure, but
Yeah, oh
So-
yeah, that's true. Yeah, dang.
yeah.
Well, I just pray that he continues to have these major social media doors open so that he can present the gospel, and I pray that when he enters these spaces that people receive it and become Christians.
Yeah.
That's what it is, at the end of the day. So
At the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that conversations like this compel people to start thinking, especially again, in an audience, in a space like Joe Rogan's. It compels people to maybe think things that they didn't think previously, to consider things that they didn't consider. And, just to be objective about it. I don't think anyone can deny that Wes was, in his academic presentation, was just being objective. He's talking about margin sizes and letter sizes. This is objectivity. And so hopefully people can see that Christianity is objective in its presentation. Like, the Bible says if the resurrection didn't happen, then what are we doing, right? It's either objectively true or not true. And so hopefully, this is something that people will consider and be more thought-provoking in terms of their engagement with the ideas like this.
100%, man. And I think even Joe Rogan kind of gave some insights there. Just like, something can be fun. Something might be entertaining, but if it ain't true, then what are we really doing right here? If it's not true, if Christianity is not true, then I don't want any parts of it, right? Thankfully,
Right.
Christianity is true. I mean, so it's not about how you feel about it. It's not about your opinions about it. Examine the claims of Christianity for yourself and see the objective truth in it, man. So with that said, we're gonna get up out of here. Y'all know what it is, man. Love God, love people. Take care of things God blesses you with. Peace.